All right, cool. So my name is Abe Haskins. For those of you who didn't see my session about 60 minutes ago, I am a developer programs engineer on the Firebase team, which pretty much means my goal is to help you be successful with Firebase by talking to you about technical aspects of Firebase. Today we're going to talk specifically about Firebase Analytics. So when we look at this big circular world of Firebase, we start to see an obvious thing, which is that Firebase Analytics is the core. And there's a reason we have a dedicated session about Firebase Analytics. That's because Firebase Analytics is super important. All of these services tie into Firebase Analytics. At Firebase, we talk about all the time about building things that make the lives of our users easier. So that means if you're our user, you're a developer using Firebase, we want to make life easier for the people who are using your product. And we do this by knowing them, by understanding them, and having a really complete idea about who our users are. But it's not just about knowing who they are, it's about having insight and making that insight actionable. So that instead of just saying, I have users, you can say, I have users in India who are 18 to 24 years old who love buying packs of stickers in my app. Or I have users in the Netherlands who always search for bread. I don't know why, but they always search for bread. Like, this is the type of insight we want to have. And then we want to be able to say, okay, how can we make our application's experience more, more customized and more natural for these users based off of this data? And so Firebase Analytics alone is super interesting. It's a great tool for capturing data about your users, about understanding them. But then when we mix it in with all these other Firebase services, we get a much more complete picture. And one of these services we'll talk specifically about today is Remote Config, for changing things in your app based on who your user is. But all of these services work really, really well with Firebase Analytics, which is why it is the core of Firebase. So here's what we're going to cover today. And these slides are not in English, so I'm going to try and remember what they say. And I believe what they say is, first we're going to look at the built-in, well, nope, getting started, that's the first one. Then we'll look at the built-in reporting, what we get for free, just by including the Firebase Analytics SDK. Then we'll look at how to kind of do some more advanced reporting custom events, how that works inside Firebase. Then we'll look at, anything about this? I know the answer. We're doing advanced reporting, and then Google Analytics with Firebase Analytics. Of course, I forget the one that is written in English. So we'll look at comparing Firebase Analytics to Google Analytics so we know when to use what and kind of how they connect and what that whole story is. And then we'll wrap things up. So first, if you want to get started with Firebase Analytics, if you want to walk out of here today and get Firebase Analytics inside of your mobile app, you go to firebase.google.com or the Chinese localized equivalent and create a new Firebase project. Takes like 2 seconds. If you have an existing Google project, maybe you have Google Sign-In or something like that enabled on another project, you can hit this handy Import Google Project button, and that will bring it in and turn that into a Firebase project. Once we have that, we can go and we can actually enable analytics. And in this picture, we see Firebase Analytics as the core, and every Firebase feature is broken up into its own library, its own SDK, kind of. That we can pick and choose. So when I want just Firebase Analytics, I ask for the Firebase core. And if I want Firebase Remote Config or Firebase Dynamic Links, I can ask for those two later and import those libraries separately. But since Analytics is the core, that's the module we're going to look at. So in iOS, that's saying, all right, our pod is Firebase core we're going to include, and then app delegate we for app configure. Now in Android, it's very similar. We can include com.google.firebase, Firebase core, and then include the Google Services plugin. And this does that, the equivalent of per app configure in Android. It's a little bit different, but it does essentially the same thing. And with this, once we have this set up, analytics is done. Or it can be, if you just want the basic reporting. Because right now, Firebase Analytics is enabled in your app, and if you ship this out to users, it's going to start reporting a bunch of data. And because Firebase Analytics has been built by a company who builds really great mobile apps and really understands our users, we know what's immediately useful, the things that are shared between every single mobile app that every mobile app developer wants to know. And we can start reporting those for free to you immediately. So what is that? It's all of this data. So we get immediately things like how often things are happening. We get location information about where events are happening. We get information about the demographic, what gender is using our app, how old are they, all of this information, including things like how long have they been in my app, how often do they use it, have they made any in-app purchases. All of this data is collected by Firebase Analytics for free, right out of the gate with no lines of code, or one if you're in iOS. So to give you some idea of what these automatic events that we include are, here's a list. We have like the first time somebody opens an app. We want to know how many people are actually opening our app after they install it. They want to know, did they make an in-app purchase? Did they update our app? Did the OS update? Did they open a notification from us? Did they open a dynamic link? All of these things you can see, they kind of connect out to the extended Firebase world. They're related to other Firebase services, like opening a dynamic link. And some of these are just data we want to know about the user, because we want to see if we get way more crashes in our app today than we did yesterday, and we didn't change anything, why could that be? Well, we can see that a ton of our users had an operating system update. A ton of people just upgraded to that new version of Android, and that's causing some issue for us. And this is the type of insight we can get for free through Firebase Analytics. So like I said, we get a bunch of stuff just immediately for free. We get all of those events that got triggered that are just built in, that are known as things that we need for mobile. And we get the ability to just, for free, discover things. And this is something I really love about Firebase Analytics. It costs basically nothing, and by basically nothing, I mean actually nothing, to include into your app. Firebase Analytics is completely free, it's completely unlimited. So you can go, you can drop this in, and then you can go look at these reports and say, am I actually understanding my users like I think I am? Are they doing what I expect? Are they using the devices I expect? All of this just by including those couple lines of code. To give you some idea of specifically what we can get out of this, we can get information about our users. So monthly active users, this is an easy common metric for measuring the value of an app. How many people use your app in a month? And of course we have that. We can see trends over time. How many people are engaging in our app? How many people did that news article really make a difference? Things like that. We can see the ARPU, the average revenue per user, and other insight like that, because this is tied into the rest of Google. It's tied into your in-app purchases, so we immediately get that type of information. And if you're interested in receipt validation and other parts of the more complex average value, average revenue per user aspects, we've thought of a ton of those issues and already tackled them, because we know that's an issue for our top apps who want to use an analytics tool like this. We also get something called a retention cohort. This is my personal favorite, mostly because I like the way it looks. But this is a chart that will show you, are people staying in your app? So imagine you had an app, you had a game, and this game was really popular for the first 2 weeks. And so in that first week, we'd have 100%, because if somebody installed the app, they're obviously going to use it the first day they use it. So that first week will always be 100%. The second week, we have 19% who are still there, and they're still doing okay. And in this case, we have 12, so this is a more average dropout. But imagine in that third week, it just dropped to 0. It dropped to like 1% of users who are still in our app. This is a situation where you might want to reevaluate your app. And this might not be something you think to look for. You might not think to instrument your app so that you can see retention cohorts. But once this is here, and you're looking around and you're fiddling with your Firebase Analytics, you'll probably see that. And you'll be like, why the heck are my users dropping off in that third week? And this is what I mean by discoverability. Like, we want you to be able to find things in Firebase Analytics that you're not really looking for, because we know the important things that app developers need, and if we know those, we can kind of put them front and center for you, so you don't have to spend a lot of time digging in and doing all sorts of slicing and dicing of your data to hopefully get some insights. You can do that if you want to export to some gigantic database that has every analytic event ever triggered for your million users everywhere in the world. You can do that with Firebase Analytics. But on the surface, to get started, we just want it to be simple. Another chart on the topic of user engagement and user retention is the user engagement section. We have daily engagement, so how long has someone been in your app, on an average day, how long do they spend, how many times do they open the app, how long do they spend per session. All of this core information that just helps you learn more about your users. And we can also correlate this to in-app purchasing data, because this is again related to user engagement, and one of the ways you could, if you're interested in it, measure engagement is through in-app purchases and just generally the success of the monetization of your app. So if we can easily see that 96 of our users are purchasing apps or are purchasing something in our app, we can immediately get some insight. And since that purchase is just a built-in event. It's just an event that gets added automatically whenever somebody purchases something. We can dig into that. Now, I don't have a slide to show it here, but we could easily click on the users chunk right there, and we can see exactly the demographic of the people who have made in-app purchases. And we can see if they're parts of other audiences we've created too. But we'll dig more into that in a minute. Something I love about Firebase Analytics versus other analytics tools. So if you've ever used Google Analytics, you probably know that Google Analytics tries in general to guess what device you're on. And this is a core split between Firebase Analytics and Google Analytics. Firebase Analytics knows for sure what device you're on. Google Analytics can try and guess it. It can try and look at a user agent in a web browser and say, well, we think you're running Windows XP and we think you're running this version of Firefox, but user agents can lie and they can just generally be very hard to detect. But with Firebase Analytics, because it's built for mobile first and because we know mobile devices, we can build it and we can make sure we know exactly what users are doing. So we can get really detailed information, like the Android operating system version or the iOS operating system version. And so we can see not only who is using our app today, but how has it changed. And we can break this down. So if I have 100 million users in India and 50 million users in the US, and I know that like 5% of my users are running an ancient version of Android, just something abysmally old, and I'm thinking of not supporting that anymore. That's kind of a blind decision to make. I don't know how many of my users in each country are going to be impacted. I could just wildly guess that 5% in the US and 5% in India will be affected. But with this information, we can dive into that. And we can say, all right, show me the users who are running an old Android version. Show me what country they're in. And then based on that information, it's really easy to make that decision in an informed way. So now we can say, yes, this user is indeed on an old version. And interestingly enough, all of his friends are on old versions too. In fact, some huge percentage of India is on an old version of Android. So if I make this decision to stop supporting this version, it's going to hurt me in India, but not really impact my US market. And these are the important types of business decisions we can make with a really good analytics tool like Firebase Analytics. Beyond that, beyond the data that you get, like we get data from you, right? You get data about your users, report it to Firebase Analytics, and you can look at it. That's great. But there's something about Google, which is that it's kind of magical. Google is an amazing company that knows a lot about people. Because that's how we build great products, is by understanding the people who use our products. And we have a lot of information about those people because we really care about them and want to make sure that what we're doing fits their needs. And we want to share that with you. So part of Firebase Analytics is insight about your users that they did not necessarily provide through your app. So for example, if I go in, I sign up for your app, and I'm just me, you might get an email address for me, and you might be able to guess, like, oh, this is maybe his Twitter profile or whatever. But you won't know who I am, you won't know how old I am, you won't know what my interests are. But because we can enrich the data we get from your app with Google data, you can get all sorts of information. So we can know where that person is located, we can know what their interests are, how old they are, what their gender is, because Google has the ability to enrich your data. So you get that extra sprinkle of Firebase or of Google magic on top of an already great Firebase Analytics tool. And this mixing is really what we're trying to do with Firebase Analytics, is provide something that's kind of magical. You don't have to say, what are your interests? I'm curious if your interests align with what I think they are. But we have that data coming in because Google can share that with you. So what happens if we go beyond this? This is the simple use case. Remember, that was all 1 to 0 lines of code to get all that benefit. What is the next step for us? Well, it's logging custom events. Now, a custom event can be anything. In this case, choosing an ice cream flavor. Why? Because I love ice cream. But in reality, it could be anything. It could be just a flag that says, hey, I joined a newsletter. Or it could be something very specific, like I selected my favorite flavor of ice cream. In this case, it's a vanilla in a cone, which is actually true, because that's delicious. If we look at this, once we log that event, it shows up in the Firebase dashboard. We can go in and we can look at how many times these events are occurring, how it relates to how many events were occurring yesterday, all sorts of insights like that. We also have the ability, over here to mark it as a conversion event. And once we mark an event as a conversion event, that means it's our end goal. So in this case, we have a bunch of different events, like the achievements page viewed, the app installed, the app updated, things like that. We might send out a push notification, for example. And the goal of that push notification might be to get you to try a new feature. So we might mark that try new feature event as a conversion event. And once we do that, we can go and we get a whole bunch of insight about that conversion event because we've marked it as an event that we really care about, that is our goal. So we can create funnels and other complicated analytical things based off of that to track if we are actually getting to our goal once we've decided what that goal is. So to click on one of these events, one of these custom events we're logging, we get a bunch of interesting information. We get how often does it happen over time, how many users are doing it, how many times per user is it happening. And then we have this interesting thing over here called value, which is just 0 and a straight line that I'll talk about in a minute. But for a simple event, you'll get all of this. You'll also, of course, get that enriched data from Google. So it's not just users triggered this event, it's all of your female users in Brazil triggered this event. And that's so much more interesting, that's so much more compelling if you know who these people are. Because now it's not just like, oh, a lot more people are trying this feature, but we know for some reason it's connecting with a certain group. So if you're interested in retargeting that group, making sure they come back to your app, you now have the insight to do that. And here's us filtering that same event of achievements page views based on gender. And this is what I'm talking about, where I say we can kind of slice and dice the data and look at it in a bunch of cool ways. So we see, now we're just seeing the subset of users who are female, but we could do it by country or age or anything like that. Now we get into the two types, and we get into explaining that value line that I explained was something I'd explain later. And we have two types of events that happen. One is a Boolean event, like it happens or it doesn't. So I joined the newsletter. That is just something that happens. There's not really any interesting data to record with that. We just know that I joined the newsletter. But if I do something like view a painting, I want to record a bunch of different information about that painting viewing. I want to know what was the painting ID, what painting did I see, what artist made that painting, what was the zoom level? Maybe I should increase the zoom, the average zoom on all my paintings. I need to know all this information to make an informed decision. But there's even more than this. Like, this is all great, and this is stuff I'll have access to, but I can also record this value property. And the value property is something arbitrary. In this case, it could be, like the amount of seconds I spent on the picture. If I spent 84 seconds staring at this picture. And now, when I go back into my dashboard, it will chart that value as the core, integer metric that I'm interested in. So we'll get a bunch of interesting data, and sometimes it'll show up in different formats. In this case, we're tracking a level up. So we want to know, we're reporting a level up event, and we're saying, all right, we want to know what level people are, and it's showing up as like a histogram type thing, where we can easily see that the vast majority of our users are level 2 through 20, we have some who are 21 to 39, et cetera, et cetera. And that's coming from that special value event. And it doesn't have to be in a histogram. Not all data makes sense in this chart. So if we're reporting like virtual good sales, imagine we had virtual goods, like a single player game or a social game, 25 power-ups, whatever these virtual goods someone might be purchasing are. In addition to in-app purchase data, which we get for free, we can record this specific data. So we can say the value for this virtual good purchase event is this, and then we can make them show up in a really wonderful table like this. And we can see that the vast majority of our virtual goods are single-player games that are being sold. And then, of course, with that, we get all the enriched data and cool charting that you would get with any other Firebase event. So that's all. That's great, but these are just actions. Knowing what a person is doing isn't a complete story. We need to know who a person is in order to truly enhance the experience for them. We need to know what they like and what their goals are. And we need to know who else is like them so we can predict what they'll need. And so imagine we have this guy, and he has a whole bunch of different facets. As a person, like any person, he has a fitness goal. He has a way he pronounces GIF. He has a way his favorite food, and his favorite musical genre. And all this information is just custom information that you can add into your app. So if you need to know favorite musical genre, you can add what we call a user property. And once you add that user property, it enriches the data you have about your users and your ability to bucket them and filter them and, like I said, enhance the experience. So let's say we go and we add in a user property. And we add favorite food. for example, and we just say your favorite food is some type of food, whatever they enter. Now we'll have the ability to start filtering on this, and favorite food can be anything. And you'll notice in these slides we have a bunch of different examples. Sometimes I'll say, oh look, we're setting a property called favorite food, and then the next slide we're talking about is their favorite color pink. And the reason I do this is to show you how versatile this system is. You can, if you're selling food, you can record that and you can make insight on that. If you're selling virtual goods, there's insight to be had there. If you're selling carpeting or whatever, there's always something interesting to know about your user so you can start bucketing them in a more efficient way. So here's another example related to paintings. Like if we went and we added a custom user property, we'd go into the console and we'd say, all right, I'm going to add a new user property. The property name is painting style, and we add a little description. And this is just so Firebase Analytics knows it should show up in the dashboard and it wants to see that this is being recorded and you want to be able to view it. So we go in and create it in here. And then once it's created, we can create an audience using that. So in this example, we have, we want to make an audience. We want to make a group of our users who are female Canadian shoppers who are fans of Italian painters. Now that's a pretty specific group. And if we say something to that group, if we send a push notification, we change the background of the app to be their favorite painter, we change this or that, we can really enrich their experience. And they might not even know that we're doing it. They might not know that this app has shifted around and changed just to connect with them. But they'll feel more connected and they'll engage better because we do this. So here we see we're pulling together a bunch of different data. It ranges from that in-app purchase, that built-in event. Have they ever made an in-app purchase? And we say count is bigger than 0. So yes, they have at some point made an in-app purchase. Then we go and we use that enriched Google data and we say, all right, if their age range is 18 to 24, 24 to 35, so that's the magic of Google. Then we'll check the country, also magic of Google. So we'll say, all right, you are from Canada. And then we'll use that custom user property. And we'll say you had to specify your favorite artist and said that was Raphael. And now we have a really complete idea of who this person is. Once we have a person though, this is where most analytics products stop. They give you an idea of who someone is, and then they kind of just stop, and they say, all right, do something with it, like take the next step yourself. And this is what really makes Firebase amazing, is that we connect you into other Firebase products so that it's not just information, it's something you can act on. So imagine we use Firebase Remote Config, and Remote Config is just a way to set values in the cloud, have your device receive them, and then change those values based on arbitrary metrics that you set up. So if I want to change a message of the day, so this might be just a banner that shows up on the top of the app, something like that. By default, we'll use this value down here. Remember, every day is the first step to a better you. That's a great slogan for fitness folks. But if you're in the runners category, the runners audience that are specified there, we're going to give you a message that directly relates to running. And this is a small change, like I said, but this could be anything. This could be colors, it could be pictures, it could be huge blobs of text. It could even be features in your app that are only enabled for certain audiences. As soon as we set this up, it's now completely automated. So if a new user comes in and they're doing things and they eventually get flagged as a runner or a female purchaser in Canada between the correct ages, they will see their experience shifting around them as your app starts to know them better. And as they get bucketed more successfully, you'll get a better and richer experience for them. And so this action is just happening magically without you going and actually changing anything or flipping any flags. Once this is set up, it's just an experience that naturally hones itself and fine-tunes itself for your users. Another example of this isn't just passive changes. Like those are great. If we can tweak the app and make it better for a user, that's fantastic. But what if we want to say something to those users? If we want to really reach out and say something specifically to them to get some action. If we think, for example, Australian purchasers, we have an audience of just everyone in Australia who've ever purchased something from us. We want to send them a push notification. We want to say, hey, we're going to give you a promo. If you were using like GCM, Google Cloud Messaging, or a different push service, sending a push notification to a specific group would require an entire other set of tools. You'd need different tooling just to send a push notification that hopefully integrated with your analytics tool. Maybe it didn't, and it'd be a huge pain. But with Firebase, it's built right in. So we can use the Firebase notifications console, go in here, say we're going to compose a new push notification, send it to a user segment that is at Australian purchasers, and it will just automatically handle all of that looking up of ID tokens, everything you'd have to do in like GCM or a traditional push notification solution, we just handle for you. And something very subtle on this slide that you might not even notice is down here, the conversion event. So our goal here is to get people to make it in-app purchases. So we're sending out this $5 promo, we're sending it to Australian purchasers, and our goal is to get them to buy another thing. And we'll have this funnel that's created that uses the built-in Firebase notifications event at the core. But it goes beyond Firebase at the core, because Firebase is part of Google. It's part of this whole gigantic, amazing company of tools and products. So if we stop to just Firebase, we'd be missing half of the opportunity here. So Firebase will actually integrate, Firebase Analytics will integrate with AdWords. So there's a lot of things you can do here, but as just an example, if I wanted to target those Australian purchases, say my push notification went pretty well, people really seem to engage with that, but I want to see if I can get more of those type of people back. I want to get them back into my app. You can import your audiences into AdWords and target those people specifically with remarketing campaigns. So you can say, hey, we really appreciate that you bought that in-app purchase, why don't you come back? And so this reaches outside of Firebase into other services like Google Cloud and AdWords and all these other Google properties, because we know that it's all better when it's connected together. And this is just a philosophy inside of Firebase. If you use one feature, it's good. Use a bunch, it's great. If you use the whole suite and integrate it with all parts of Google, you're basically unstoppable. So let's talk, speaking of the extended Google ecosystem, about Google Analytics. How many people have ever used Google Analytics? A lot of people, handful. Most people have used Google Analytics. It's been around for a long time. Most websites probably in the world use Google Analytics. Don't quote me on that, I'm not 100% sure that's true. But it's very popular. And it's easy to wonder, like, how does this compare and contrast? Why would I use Firebase versus Google Analytics or vice versa? So some key points about Firebase Analytics. Why would you care about Firebase Analytics? One, it's free. It's actually free, and it is actually unlimited. Almost every other analytics offering is going to cost you a lot of money. You'll pay by user, or you'll pay by the number of events logged, or whatever. Firebase Analytics isn't like that. It is completely free, whether you have 10 users, or 10 million, or some other gigantic number. And we prove that. Many top partners use Firebase Analytics, and we charge none of them. We also focus in Firebase Analytics on events and users. So some other analytics offerings are focused more on like page flow, if they were coming from the web world. Firebase Analytics is about understanding users, enriching your information about those users, and understanding what they're doing. So it's just a different philosophy about how to look at your users. Then, Firebase Analytics integrates with the rest of Firebase. Obviously, this is what we've been talking about this whole time. The value of Firebase Analytics is that it goes beyond Firebase Analytics and goes into all these other Firebase features. This is something no other analytics tool can do, because very few other suites of tools have any offering even close to the quality of Firebase, with so many different features that reach into so many parts of your app. And then lastly, this is the only one of these that may not be super positive in your mind, which is that Firebase Analytics is mobile only. And the reason Firebase Analytics is mobile only is because we didn't want to do a solution that was okay for web and okay for mobile. We knew that mobile was a fundamentally different problem than web. So if we made it an analytics solution that worked okay in both situations, we wouldn't be doing anything innovative. We wouldn't be changing anything. So that's what we said, we're not going to focus on web. We're going to build the absolute best analytics offering for mobile, and we're going to do it only on mobile, unless we can come up with a way to do something equally good on web, which we feel like we've kind of already done with Google Analytics. So with Google Analytics, it is mobile and web. You can use Google Analytics on mobile, but it's not a natural situation. Over the years, Google Analytics has evolved from something that records page views to something that records events, and the events are mostly all page views. So you can record custom events in mobile, and there's some SDKs to do it, but it's nowhere near as natural and as powerful as Firebase Analytics. Google Analytics also is just old. It is very mature, and it has really good support for specialized reporting. If you want to do very specific things, visualize very specific flows through your app, this is something Google Analytics can do. And this is really powerful. You can do these types of things in Firebase, But right now it's a bit more manual. You have to export it to another tool, like Data Studio, that Google offers, and kind of build these reports out there. But Google Analytics has it built in. Google Analytics also has a paid tier, and I personally don't know the exact dollar value of the paid tier. It is very, very high. Like you're doing good until you hit that, and then it gets super, super expensive. And this is because at that level, you get dedicated support and an SLA. Now we have SLAs on Firebase, but the dedicated support, the ability to interact one-on-one with someone inside of Google, is not something Firebase Analytics offers today. So if you need that, if you really want a dedicated account manager, Google Analytics does offer that. So if we're building a mobile app today, and just a mobile app, not a cross-platform experience, just an iOS and an Android app, we should use Firebase Analytics. It is really just generally better for doing mobile app development, or mobile app analytics. If we're building just a web experience today, we should still use Google Analytics. This thing's been around forever. There's a reason people still use it. It's an amazing product. So if you're building just a web app, use Google Analytics. But what if we're building both? What if we're building an app that is really important that we understand our users between the platforms regardless of where they're at? What do? We use both. And this immediately just seems kind of weird. Why would you use both? They're different products. I just spent all this time explaining that they're very different products. But we put a bunch of effort into making sure that Firebase Analytics feels good with Google Analytics, to the extent that Firebase Analytics can export all of its data to Google Analytics. So you have all these events, all these interesting things, all this insight on your user. You can export that into Google Analytics and mix it in with all of your web data. So you can track the same users right from mobile into your existing Google Analytics web stack. So there's a really huge amount of opportunity there for enriching the data you already have and connecting your mobile experience back with your web one. So to wrap up what we talked about how to get started. It's 2 lines of code. We talked about how to log, or how to get all that benefit out of all that built-in data, the Google magic of the built-in events and the enriched data. We talked about logging events, which was one method call, so another line of code there. Then we talked about Google Analytics and Firebase Analytics, how to decide between them. Take away there is Google for web, Google Analytics for web, Firebase Analytics for mobile, and then we did this wrap-up. So some links for you. Go to firebase.google.cn for general documentation about this, more information. And for Firebase Analytics specifically, it will, firebase.google.cn will pretty much get you there anyway, because it is very important for Firebase. But if you're interested only in analytics, you can go to /docs/analytics. And the last thing I really want to push is, at Google, we care a ton about open source. A lot of my job is writing open source code. A lot of my coworkers' job is writing open source code. So if you're interested in what it's like to build software inside of Google, what type of code we write, spoiler, it's kind of okay sometimes, but we always make it a lot better as we progress. That's why we develop in the open a lot, because we love getting feedback from people smarter than us. So all of this awesome stuff we're building, Firebase alone has about 90 open source projects of all sorts of things, ranging from like Scala code that we used as part of the Relevant database at some point to integrations with different services and tools and apps and stuff we built in examples. So if you're interested in any of that, you can either go check out my GitHub or the Firebase GitHub at github.com/Firebase. And with that, thanks for coming, and if you have any questions, feel free to just grab me after, and I'm happy to talk about it.
我想问一下，就是那个，假如说我的 app 已经发布出去了，然后再接入你这个 Firebase 的时候，那个用户，比如说你们算的是新升级用户还是新增用户？就是如何兼容老版本的统计的话。
So if I already publish the app and then I start to use Firebase, will Firebase just count the new users, or all the users will be also taken?
If you don't have Firebase Analytics installed when you initially publish your app, you won't get any data from those users, so you'll have to enable it from the get-go to start collecting information on every single user.
就是老的数据可能是没有统计的，但是当你开始用了 Firebase 之后呢，你后面所有的用户的 data 都会被 Firebase 的安全收集。
I have a question about the user properties. How do you identify that a shopper is interested in Raphael painting? How do you get that information?
Yeah, so that's the type of information that is kind of up to your app to get. So you could prompt the user and, you know, say, what is your favorite painting? Or you could get that through looking at their activities and saying, all right, this person really likes paintings from this person. I'm going to mark them as having this interest. But we leave that pretty open to the developer to say, to collect that type of information about their user.
So I have been using Firebase for a long time. In our problem, that we can only see the data that in a period of time, but we cannot see the data report that divided by every day. So I just want to know when the Firebase can launch this feature.
So you were saying you only see a subset of your data, or you can only see it so far back? Oh, so you can't see it on a daily level of granularity. That's a good question. I'm assuming that's something we're working on. The amount of work being done on analytics in terms of like improving the console and stuff is just absolutely absurd. So I don't know specifically when that's coming, but I know everything related to the dashboard and the console for Firebase Analytics is like hugely high priority for us to really get right. So I'm guessing it's in the works, but I don't know specifically.
One suggestion, you can go to the booth, there's engineer working on Firebase Analytics.
Yeah, you can
Talk
definitely
with
do
them.
that. All right, awesome. Thanks everyone. Appreciate it.